Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Ciecko, and I'm the founder of Cuseum. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who is joining us today, our speakers, our attendees. I hope all of you find yourself safe and healthy, first and foremost. This is going to be our final Cuseum webinar of 2020, calendar year 2020, and we're so excited and grateful for everyone who's tuning in today. To our first-time watchers, welcome, and for those of you who have tuned into any of our past webinars, I think there's probably been an upwards of 40. Thank you again for being here, and thank you for your enthusiasm and support over the past 10 months or so. It's been really humbling to be involved in so many inspiring conversations and discussions about the cultural sector across dozens of different topics. These webinars have become a really dynamic gathering place, a forum, a community, and we've been so inspired by the panelists and audience members who've been a part of these programs for this past year. And it goes without saying, 2020 has been a really challenging and transformative year for the sector, for the cultural sector. When museums first closed their doors back in March, no one could have predicted the profound disruption and change that COVID-19 could usher in for all of us. And over the past 10 months, we've witnessed how museums of different shapes and sizes have taken new approaches to community engagement, spearheading digital initiatives, scaling up virtual educational programs, even developing new revenue streams, and all things in between, especially around serving on-site and off. And so as 2020 comes to a close, now is the time to reflect on many of the setbacks and successes of the cultural sector for this past year. And we hosted our very first webinar back in March. And I have to say it was a knee-jerk reaction to what we saw evolving around us. So I reached out to some trusted friends and people I admire. Thank you, Seema. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Atiba. And before we knew it, on that first webinar, close to 4,000 people from around the globe registered to tune into this conversation. We didn't know what would come of it. But for today's conversation, we're going full circle. We're welcoming back some of our earliest guests to see how things have evolved from when we first spoke, to reflect on the last 10 months, and to look forward towards the future with all of us. So I'm so excited to introduce our amazing panelists today. So without further ado, let me make those introductions and let's get going. Joining us from Ohio, we have Seema Rao, the Deputy Director and Chief Experience Officer at the Akron Art Museum. She has over 20 years of museum experience and brings an extensive background in interpretation, programming, digital content, and developing for all audiences. In her 17 years at the Cleveland Museum of Art, she led research and content development for many digital projects, including the very, very innovative and world-renowned Gallery 1 and Studio Play. Her work has directly impacted millions of museum visitors, and we're so happy to have you here with us, Seema. Excellent. And joining us from over in Brooklyn, New York, we have Atiba Edwards. Atiba is the Executive Vice President and COO of the Brooklyn Children's Museum, overseeing finance, HR, visitor experience, marketing, membership, facilities, and several other areas. Prior to joining Brooklyn Children's Museum, he led a charter school in Brooklyn, and before that, he spent 5 years in investment banking at JP Morgan and Nomura Securities. You might be the only investment banker in the museum space, and I love that. And Atiba also runs Focus, an arts not-for-profit organization based in Brooklyn and in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Atiba was born on the island of St. Vincent in the Caribbean and grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn. He graduated from the University of Michigan. I see your mug in the background, great way to represent. And with degrees in industrial and operations engineering and general studies with a focus in poetry and musicology. Thank you so much for joining us, Atiba. Great. And last but not least, Scott Stulen. Scott is the Director and President of the Philbrook Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He is the former Curator of Audience Experiences and Performance at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, now called Newfields, Project Director of MinnesotaArtist.org at the Walker Art Center, as well as a visual artist, writer, and DJ. Notable projects include Artist Design Mini Golf, CSA, Community Supported Art, and the Internet Cat Video Festival, which has toured over 250 cities and 13 countries to date. So happy to have you on. So happy to have you back, Scott. And last but not least, before we all unmute and go for it, I am Brendan Ciecko, the founder and CEO of Cuseum. I will be your host for today's conversation. So I want to loop back on one of the very first questions on one of these webinars. Feels like ages ago. Scott, early on in the pandemic, when we were having the first of many virtual discussions about cultural organizations in this kind of COVID-19 era, you made a prediction about how museums would have to shift their traditional ways of thinking, to survive ultimately. You said, and I quote, we need to make things move faster so you can go from idea to approval to execution within days, if not hours rather than weeks or months like we normally run. That's not how museums normally operate. Our risk tolerance needs to go way up, and we need to be able to reward things that do work and learn from them as we go forward. So over the past 10 years or so, have you witnessed museums adopt in this way? I'd love to hear from you on this.
So, well, first of all, thank you for inviting us back. And it's interesting to actually look back. And it feels like so long ago.
No.
And I feel like I've aged 10 years in that time. And maybe that's just because we stare at each other in a Zoom screen and see each other all the time. Right?
You look the same.
Younger, in
I
fact.
feel older.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was talking about marketing. Younger, you look younger.
Exactly. But I feel, I think what's really interesting is looking back when we had that first conversation, we were still in triage mode. So it was like every single day, if not hour, there was a new problem you had to solve, make a decision and move on. And you just kind of deal with it. And then you run on adrenaline for a period of time, and then that runs out. And I think we got to kind of May when you realize this wasn't going to be a couple of weeks, but we're looking at months, if not longer. And you switch into a different mode, or you need to switch in a different mode, which is much, much harder. So when you start looking at things that are more duration, it's keeping staff spirits up. It's being able to keep everything moving, worrying about people's jobs, worrying about all the things that we do to kind of keep our organizations safe, but also viable, and being able to balance all this. Nobody's been through a pandemic like this before either. So there wasn't like a place that we could go and say, there's the roadmap. So I think it's just such an interesting moment that we had to kind of deal with. But I think the bigger challenge has been after those first couple of months, where you're dealing with the things immediately pressing, is how are you dealing with the stuff beyond that? So it comes back to your original kind of prompt for this question. I really truly believe that we did, as museums, most places did move to a more rapid decision-making process, more experimentation, looking at things that are a little less precious, and thinking about how you have systems that are just able to respond in a more quick manner, and not thinking about over months and years, but thinking over days and weeks. Now, I can say from the Philbrook perspective, we did a lot of that immediate, like we're making a decision and then the next hour we're doing it. And then we moved into something now that's been a little bit more of a hybrid, where we're kind of have a system that is so much faster than it used to be, but it's a little bit more deliberate than being an immediate response. So that it has feedback coming into it, has thinking about kind of how this works in a more consistent, sustainable kind of manner. So I think that's all good. And I think when you really look at some of the institutions that I think are thriving right now in this, those are those ones that have been able to rapidly respond. And I won't call anybody out, but there are institutions that I think have been very slow to respond to this, that kind of thought it was all going to kind of wash over, and then they'd be able to kind of just reset back to February. But those, including on this call, I think are those of us that really kind of saw this as an opportunity and really were able to respond to it, and we'll continue to do so.
I think you also brought up, and thank you for having us. And March was another, it felt like another planet. A different me was sitting, I think, at that thing. But Scott also brought up something really, I think it's important, that for a lot of us who have like gotten to this point from March, it was that we learned how to cope. Like you talked about rapid response and then moving into this sort of system you have, and I was saying when we pre-talked, but we have like what we call A and B. And so we have two different, we always think of two different solutions. And we were just recently faced with having to deal with it. And I said to somebody, I was like, I had a dream that we would make no hard decisions in December, because we'd been making so many decisions. And I thought our problem institutionally was decision fatigue. So I was like, let's just I did it like in September, it was August, I think, that we were like, let's set ourselves up to not have too much to do in December. And then we still ended up the rates and the this and the that. And so we were making decisions in December, and they were like, well, but we had actually made the decision, and this was B and A. And so and I realized, oh, what we did was we taught ourselves how to cope. And that's sort of what, Scott's talking about. Like we were in triage and we were like fight or flight. And now we've sort of, I don't want to use the word evolved. I think it's like not the right word, but we've changed a little bit as a group, and we're kind of finding the way to do that. And the organizations I see that have done well are the ones who are willing to change a little bit.
Thank you. And Atiba, what has your response been around kind of this change in speed, change in pace? Is it a marathon? Is it a sprint? Is it interval training? What have you been seeing over at the the museums in New York and at the Brooklyn Children's Museum in that regard?
I think it's a marathon in the vein of like a Tough Mudder or a Spartan race, where you don't know what obstacle you're going to run into, but you have to be here for the next one that comes after, and how do you surmount it. And I think the key part for us at Brooklyn Children's Museum and many of the people we've spoken to is making the best decision given the known knowns and the assumed unknowns. You go back to March, we're like, oh, if I peg it to Wuhan, okay, it'll be 3 to 4 months. But the reality is the US didn't do the exact same strategy, so that wasn't the right assumption. And then we said, okay, maybe July, maybe October, maybe the vaccine comes out and that'll change things. It's like you can't chase the unknown. It's like we got to take everything we know and make the best decision, and then just stick with it. And like Seema mentioned, have that alternative plan, because we're one announcement away from relocating at resources on how we do our work. Meaning, if the governor comes out and says, okay, we have to close back up again, we have to quickly move to that. But we went through that in March. So we know the knowns are, we're open to the public on the weekends, we're bringing people in, they're having a good time. At some point, rates might spike, the state might have a mandate, so we have to shift back. So we just know what we know, and that's really the best thing we can do. So I would say it's operating from a space of the known unknowns, but knowing, again, it's a tough mudder of a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint.
Yeah, I also love that thing. I'm sorry, can I just underscore?
Yeah, totally.
It's going to help everyone. Do you make your best decision, not the best decision? I think that's so great.
Yeah, because you'll find, it's particularly with all the variables, it's every decision you can rationalize why that's a good one. Yeah. And you can spend your entire day rationalizing, but you just have to pick the best decision possible.
Totally. Yeah, it's even right now, like the timing of this particular conversation, I remember when we had this first conversation back in March, is days after I started getting, emails from the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the ICA, the Gardner, all of the museums in Boston where I'm located. And I'm getting the same emails days before this webinar that they're closing, to be proactive around safety and health and public, public health for that matter. So I think the key difference is the scramble versus, okay, we've been through this, we know what to expect, we've become, much better when it comes to decision making and having, a better framing around that. So Seema, in a similar vein, back in March, again, our first webinar discussion, you posed the question, are we going to change the paradigm of what is shared, included, and permissible in our spaces digitally? And you said, I think so. By the way, with the beauty of the internet, if you say something that we love, it might come back in 10 months for you to respond to. So we're all beautifully accountable to these big, bold statements, but they hold true, and I think they've held up well.
I know, I'm glad. I don't know what else I said.
But yeah, have you seen the shift in a way that you anticipated?
I don't know if I anticipated it. I can't say that I'm, clairvoyant, but I wish it was. I am glad I said that, because I think it is true in some ways. I think, sort of like Scott said, there are organizations that really rose to the challenge. What I love is that it's not across the board what Adrian Lally-Hills calls the blue chip museums. And I'm an expat of a blue chip museum, so I don't say it in any derivative way. But there are people with a lot of resources that also had a lot of baggage that they had to carry into this pandemic. And so some of them did amazing things and some of them didn't. There are ones that were very small. I still could not find, but I know somebody in the chat will tell me there's a great UK museum that does the best TikToks that I love. I just didn't have a chance in between today and yesterday when we were pre-chatting and chatting today. So somebody will put it in the chat for everyone else. And there's lots of institutions, and I don't want to even call out because I will miss all kinds of friends and people I love. But yes, what I would say is that the people who are willing to take that charge reap the benefits. And some of them reap them quite, like big, and some of them reap them small. Like we started Museum Games. I had been talking about Museum Games then, and we got great feedback on Museum Games. For all we ended up, we do it because we have a big game fest in November, and we ran it, and we have a crazy arcade that's on our website that you can look at. But we reaped the benefits of that event in March all the way through November. But that's because we decided to change the rules and do it. There were other people who I think had the problem that you were talking about, that they were so focused on hoping when it would open that they couldn't see the forest for the trees. And we in March basically were like, no programs all 2020. So I never was in my mind those things. And so I think it's sort of a roundabout way to say some people were able to do that. I think our successes come out of the infrastructures we had, and the infrastructures we chose to, I don't want to say break, but maybe transform. And some people in leadership positions didn't either have the ability or make the choice to change it. So it's kind of a wishy-washy answer. I don't know.
If it's okay, just to add it, I think part of it was, I think you made a good point, is like, if you had the infrastructure before they were set up for this, you were in a better position.
Yeah.
We have a really strong social media presence and a voice that helped us in this situation. But so much of it is not about the tools, because everybody's got a cell phone now and you can put it out there, and raw video is fine. Doesn't have to be slick and highly produced. It's having something to say and being authentic. And then being able to put it out there and not have some of the layers that we always would put on things, overthinking it and making it feel like it has to go through a million processes, but thinking about who on your team has a voice that needs to be heard. And this gave an opportunity to let more people into that conversation than we probably would have normally. Like, our horticulturists are some of the best people we have on social, because they can go out there and talk about somebody doing a victory garden in their backyard.
And they don't know what's
tie
wrong.
It back. Correct. And they're not self-conscious about
it.
Exactly.
Thank you, Elizabeth Peterson.
It pulled some of that down, which is a good thing.
That's good.
I have to say thank you, Elizabeth Peterson. It's Black Country Living Museum. Their TikToks.
Cool. Well, it seems like in the chat I've seen the phrase or the word pivot thrown about, dozens of times. Would you say that there's been a little bit of that? Some would say, Seema, some say evolution, some will say pivot, and it might be hundreds of little micro pivots throughout the process. But I want to talk a little bit about the on-site experience and some of the challenges there. And I know Atiba, within the Children's Museum, which we've talked about before, is even more reliant on the on-site physical and hands-on experience than other types of museums. When we had you on the webinar back in May, you talked about reimagining the on-site experience and engaging guests, through new senses to facilitate a safe and immersive visitor experience. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you think the future of on-site might look like, in the near term, even past kind of the vaccine phase, but what have been some of the permanent impacts on this moment in how you think about on-site experience at your museum?
I think with us, we reduced our capacity to about 25%, and it gave us an opportunity to also concurrently increase our staffing. So, myself, the president, everyone, we're at the entire floor. I mean, you can't walk more than, I would say, 5 feet before you run into another staff member. And this allowed us to really rethink the on-site experience by creating almost a bespoke, personalized touch. Somebody's making a choice. They woke up today, they put on a mask, they did the whole 9, and then they came to our museum. So we always want to make sure we're super thankful to them about that, saying you could have, especially, the warm November months that we've had, you could have gone anywhere and you stood a chance to come in with us. So the on-site experience has really been pivoted by, I used the word, damn it. The on-site experience has been changed just by the importance of personal touch. And I think the reduced capacity is really thinking about, okay, how do I make sure every visitor feels like a certain level of personal touch from the minute they walk in the door and the minute they go all the way through? But one of the precursors to that was, what I would feel sometimes is overlooked is the importance of the personal touch with staff and making sure staff feels safe, heard, secure, and every which way, because that's going to translate in terms of energy and vibes that they give off to everybody that walks in the door. So it gave us a chance to really we spent about 2 weeks, September and October, onboarding about 18 new staff members and doing about 2 weeks of training from the ground up. Like, let's think about how do we do this in a way that feels good to you, because that energy is going to transfer to every visitor. And then the on-site experience for our visitors was that much more better, meaning we have so many beautiful photos we've been able to capture. We have staff members interacting with the visitors, be it playing with sand or helping them guide them through the experience, saying, okay, you have a toddler, let's go down to this space. It's really age appropriate for toddlers, and let me kind of create a museum experience for you. So the on-site experience, I think, we're able to really reevaluate the personal touch in a way that was lost and absent, because it was just like, let's get as many people through the door, in and out, but making sure they still enjoy it. But it was like, let's get 1,000 people in on this weekend so we can make sure they have a good time. It's more like we have 250 people per session in a 100,000 square foot space. It will always feel like their own personal museum, but let's go the extra step of like just a simple greeting. Hey, how you doing? Oh, did you check this up upstairs? So I say the on-site experience was really bolstered by the importance of personal touch during these last 7, 8, 9 months.
Thank you.
And I wonder, if maybe also for those people, they haven't seen any other people. For us, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely like humans, and I'm an extrovert. But even any person who walked into the building and I would see them, they'd be like, "Can I talk to you?" They were just so happy for another human, which I don't know, it really made me feel good that we were open. A lot of we're now physically closed, but we were open for a number of months, and we have surgical grade HVAC. We had all the signs and the things, and we had contactless and no cash and all this stuff. And so it was a safe place for people to see other people. That was a huge public service our institutions were doing across the country.
Yeah, I can tell you when we reopened, we had people crying that actually just because they'd missed it. And particularly we opened the gardens first and then the museum itself. But just to have that, it had been so much a part of people's life that had been absent. So to be able to bring it back, but the bigger piece of it is to be able to do it safely.
Yes.
So we had a lot of people that are only coming like to our museum because we're really strict about all of our policies here. And we've been very, very diligent about that. And I know anecdotally from a lot of people, this is the only place they've gone in the entire city outside of their house because it's the one other place they feel safe. So I've been kind of joking that our big blockbuster show for the year is called We're Safe. And that's been the driver for all of it, because I honestly think that bar is down to that point where it can be that simple. Yeah. Is that, and we've done things like have piles out in the gardens and let people dig. And that's been like the thing. People come out and jump in leaf piles. And so it can be really simplified down in all of this. And I just want to say one thing about the personal touch though too. In order to enforce those policies and make staff feel safe about it, we've actually been having a greeter table out front of the museum every day we've been open since June, staffed by all managers, senior leadership, and myself, that greet people come in, enforce the mask policy before they get to our guest experience staff, and answer those questions. But it's been so informative to be able to hear from people, see what's going on, why are they coming, what are they liking. And we're in the middle of a master planning process. And I've learned more from sitting at that table in master planning than I think I have in all the consultants we've sat through, because you're actually seeing what people do and where they're getting confused and what they're kind of doing. So I just wanted to add that is that there's a kind of a blessing out of this that was completely unexpected. But I also think it's been really important to staff that we've shared that burden, including leadership, that has been out there kind of on those front lines.
Thank you. And I have to just, say one of the coolest posts to see, from folks like the three of you have been when you've taken selfies with your mask, you're on the front lines, you're showing it's safe enough for me to be here, for my family to be here. And I think kind of action speaks louder than words. And I just love seeing museum directors, leadership, anyone, behind the scenes really, sticking their neck out and being a part of the process and being there with the people to, kind of rebuild trust, not necessarily rebuild trust, but to make people comfortable and to go above and beyond. So I remember seeing those pictures and going, those are the future kind of museum there already are museum leaders, but the future museum leaders for sure. So kind of changing gears a little bit towards the digital side, since March, most cultural organizations have either introduced or ramped up their digital or virtual offerings, experimenting with new forms of content, Some had the infrastructure, some didn't. Some had the experience and the resources, some didn't. But in light of this, what do you think the future of virtual program might look like? Will organizations scale the programs that succeeded to be more permanent moving forward? You know, maybe over the next couple of years, they'll kind of keep what they have today in place. And will virtual programs, and we'll tackle this in two parts, will virtual programs be a viable revenue stream going forward in the future? I know a lot of people are talking about that, thinking about that, trying to weigh the pros and cons. Seema, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I bet everyone's like waiting to know, like they're writing down in their budgets right now. I think that we've obviously, like everybody in leadership, it's budget season. A lot of us have summer fiscal years, so we're all sitting probably thinking about budgets. I certainly am. I think that I was thinking about a lot of performing arts, for example. I have done many friends, have gone to lots of wonderful things, like wonderful game events that I paid for, and it's definitely different than March where everything was free. I think that the thing that's true is that our future will be in some ways like our past. So there are things that we used to do that we'll want to go back to do. So an on-site experience will still be important to some people. I think our future will be nothing like our past. There are people, one of my colleagues said, there are people who realize that they didn't need to leave the house. That is true. That there are people for whom, and including me, like I did that hip hop Nutcracker. I'm not from New Haven, Connecticut. I would have never seen it. But my kids loved it. And so I think that there are parts of the future that will probably draw very heavily on digital content. I don't think it will be a cash cow because, I was talking to somebody, we're working on an event for a social media game for winter, because we think that winter people will still be stuck and they'll want something fun. And so I was talking to the person who's helping me with it. And she said something really smart, that the problem is the cost of running that program is not the cost of actually filming the program, but the hundreds of hours of planning it, and then your actors and your artists, whoever's doing it. The cost of our work is so expensive. If we did like per hour being open, couldn't afford it. So I would suspect that virtual will ramp up more than it was before, but not as much as it is now. And it's because of those factors.
And I think, not to go into too much about the rise and the fall of the milkman and delivery, but there's a certain aspect of ability and choice where right now, many people are making the choice not to go out. So they need to bring something to them. And then the quick, heady connection is that, the milkman brought you milk. At some point, we had the ability and choice to go out and get ourselves at a cheaper price. Now we're faced with something where we may not be able to go out because our spaces are closed or we just don't feel comfortable. And the opportunity cost between, if I spend 5 minutes here, is it worth that $5 to buy this program? So I think to me, it's very early, but it's almost thinking about, particularly for performance spaces and some other mediums, a subscription-like model, right? Where you're able to say, I'm going to bundle in all these services, just don't add a plus to it. Whoever's thinking about launching it, please don't put a plus on behind it. I'm going to bundle all these services and give them to you as a per year cost, because it's, the price elastic demand about anything we do. As soon as it goes from $0 to $1 and $2, demand drops off because people are unsure about how we want to, is this really worth my $5 or is this really worth my $4.99? It's really thinking about how do you bundle a set of experiences, because I'm going to trust that I'm going to give you, let's say, $10 a month, and I'm going to get some really curated things that I normally wouldn't be able to go out and do. Or I'm now getting things from the UK and from South Africa and Cape Town and all these places. I'm now able to actually enjoy and learn so much more about the cultural landscape in a realm that I normally would not have been able to. But to underscore Seema's point, if it ends up being more than a single-digit %, you should write a book about it. I don't see it really leaving too much impact on earned income, because it's such a very high overhead to do something just good enough. Not necessarily high quality, HD, 4K, the whole nine, but just getting the time, the energy, the editing, the resources, promotion behind it. So that's why you almost have to create this multiple offerings for one price point. But I think as we move and run towards digital, there's a unique aspect of accessibility that gets overlooked, right? There's so many people, roughly 20 to 30 million people do not have steady access to digital content. In the last month of March, April, May, everybody under the sun rushed because you kind of had to be in that space. I had to do something digital because everybody else was doing it. But we left behind, and we continue to leave behind, this very large gap. And really the grading of that gap is something we don't know until we have to encounter ourselves. And like the parallel is, you know, I fractured my ankle playing basketball. And at that point, I realized how bad New York City is for accessibility needs. Now, in a digital standpoint, we all have digital content. We're all connected here. I'm sure anybody can remember the minute they lose their Wi-Fi or cell signal, they're holding their phone up like it's a metal detector in the air, just trying, like 30 seconds is too long. There are people who've been dealing with that their entire life. So how do we still give enough from a digital content, but then still parallel it with, you know, IRL or in real life experiences? So what we've been doing at Brooklyn Children's Museum is giving out these art kits through partnerships. And like, you know, you probably have 1 or 2 or 3 tablets at home and the Wi-Fi is down because everybody's on it and everybody wants to talk and video. So like, here's something tangible you can touch. So I think the future to digital is important and we're really rushing towards it. But in that rush, I just, you know, impede upon everybody. Like, think about everybody who may not have that same access and what you
different
can
access, right?
Oh, yes, exactly.
And so I live in Cleveland and I work in Akron, but both cities have students have one-to-one computers, but because of this, the people gave out, you know, Chromebooks or whatever. But before that, most people's internet was on their phone, and many of the programs before COVID were being maximized for computers.
Mm-hmm.
And even, you know, we have a number of staff right now in Closure who are helping with digital projects. They're doing visual description and some other research that we need. And we had to find workarounds because some people don't have computers at their house, and we don't have laptops in our organization. Not everyone has a laptop, but you're right. It taught some of us that what we thought was true isn't true digitally, and then some of us just didn't listen.
Well, I feel like we've gone through this crash course in 10 months that we were kind of forced to do. Like, we've done about 300 digital programs, I think, since March. And there's a lot of those we'll never do again, because we went through and we did them and they were for a moment. And there was kind of this flood, like, let's just try everything. In April, let's throw it all out there. We kind of need to flood the zone. And then you realize that a lot of that stuff just doesn't work very well, or everybody else did it and there's too much content out there and it doesn't cut through. And now we have the saturation. So I think that's the real thing, is like, in this saturation, what can you stand out that's unique and what do people actually need in all of it? So for us, the stuff that's worked is stuff that's unique, behind the scenes content, stuff that's maybe with, you know, experts like our horticulturists, and then family programming that's on a regular basis. 10 o'clock Saturday morning, there it is. It's for 15 minutes and I know that it's there. That stuff's worked very well, and stuff that has a little bit of an evergreen kind of nature to it as well. And so now where I've seen stuff that actually has made some money is that if you have access to high level talent that you couldn't actually normally bring in. So let's say you can do a talk with a really well-known author that you can zoom in for an event. One of our staff members also runs an independent bookstore in town. They've been able to do this very successfully with high-level authors and support their bookstore through it. But you have to have access to those people. And if you can create that, I think that's going to stick, because I think that's working. I can also see things in certain performing arts that's working too, where thinking about like a show, like, let's say there's a band playing in Brooklyn at a small club. I'm not in Brooklyn. I'd love to like zoom into it at midnight, or I'm not able to go there and do it. Some of that stuff works. And I think that's something that we may not have found out about. And I'm thinking how that can apply to a museum context as well. And there's things like, you know, first run movies coming out on Friday at home with kids. It's kind of awesome. And some of that's going to stick, you know. So I think it's kind of, we're all learning some of these lessons, and then how do we adapt it to a museum context? Some will work and some won't.
I think one thing is, from a like technology standpoint, the kind of, to your point, Seema, like we have these super powerful computers in our hands right now. In the future, I think there's a realm of, right now, AR, some LiDAR kind of detection skills, because it was like, you know, you think about, like, to me, Virtual Boy, great early entry, failed miserably. And then 3D was the big thing, but there's so much challenge of scaling 3D. VR is like, but you look at these AR kind of things with like Cause, and Nina Chanel Admi did some really great things with that. You're moving back to a space where technology is able to bring people together. And you think about something like Sims or Second Life, that was in a way like that set the ground for Fortnite, where people are doing these shows and these huge concerts, and it's just the aspect of being connected in the digital realm. So I think there's a hybrid of a alternate reality universe that you can exist in, but also using technology that we carry around in our pocket to further interactions in spaces, because as much as we try to fight it, screen time will always be high in everybody's museum. So let's think about what we can do to offer a seat in that arena while people are in their phone. Like, let's think about some fun things we can do. So from a practical technology standpoint, I think, that's something in the future as well.
Well, let's
Yeah,
talk
I
a
agree.
little bit about the, the connection between, the human connection aspect, the community building aspect, because I think that is so critical to how the content lands and the type of content, that organizations are going to be thinking about and experimenting with. And I think given, the shift that's taking place about who your audience is, who your community is, who you thought it was, around the travel restrictions, the fact that people aren't traveling as much as they had been, and how that's going to change depending on if you're, in a big city or a more regional type of institution. It kind of strips things back to our audience is our on-site audience is our local community. Our digital audience probably still our local community, but there is further reach with regards to certain types of programs, if they do have, as Scott, you mentioned, kind of the big name talent or something really novel and interesting. How are your organizations thinking about that? Tapping in, serving your local community or your 50-mile radius to the best degree possible, both physically and digitally, and then also thinking about, well, digital is going to be a little bit different because the reach is kind of untethered.
I can
That's
say
like the
for
value
us.
add. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can say for us, we know that the drive market is really what we're seeing a lot of that. And it's, being in Tulsa, Oklahoma, too, it's thinking about that we're getting more people from Kansas City and Dallas and Oklahoma City and St. Louis and that market than we did before. We're seeing that anecdotally. And the interesting thing in that demographic, though, is that our audience has been more diverse and younger than it's ever been. And it's partly, so that core audience is staying home.
Well, it's funny.
So we're seeing a lot of different people out.
They're high risk.
It goes it's interesting. It goes back a little bit to, Scott, what you were talking about, kind of in a funny way, that this is the safe place for people. And I remember when I was younger being really intrigued by that radioactive symbol, because when you're little, that's cool to you. And I remember driving down the street in Springfield, Massachusetts, and seeing that radioactive symbol and asking my parents, and they said, oh, it's a fallout kind of safe building. And it was the Symphony Hall. And then seeing it in the museum. And then I just started noticing that in my adult life, that back during the Cold War, Symphony Hall and the museum were the safe place because their granite blocks are so substantial. And now they're the safe place to some degree. If you go there, you're going to have, an extra level of kind of peace of mind, comfort, that all necessary things have been done. So it's kind of funny to think about people from, these further away cities coming, because they probably, they're hungry for that type of experience, but they also know it's going to be a safe place to go, of anything to do in your city. So it's interesting to think about. It's kind of unexpected, I think. But continue. Sorry.
No, I think I love that analogy, because I think that is something that we're trying to do, is how do we be welcoming and inclusive and safe for people coming, and people are looking for that in a lot of different types of ways. But really looking at a museum as being one of those type of spaces where they feel physically safe, but also there's like different ideas and they're being exposed to different things, and people are hungry for that, and really hungry for on-site experiences too, even if they're really simple.
Yeah. Yep.
And during the summer, we turned the sprinklers on one of our hills and just invited families to come run through the sprinklers. So again, it costs like nothing to do that, but what a great gesture. And it also a way of completely flipping what you think the museum's about. And so there's different ways that this can kind of operate as entry points that we hope will continue beyond, this moment in time, that people were looking for something to do where they felt safe. They could bring their family and say, museum, I never thought of that, but in this moment I did. And look what it opened up to, for other things.
That should be the title of your book on how you survived 2020. What a way to flip what the museum is about. Yeah, we had a lot of new visitors, a lot of younger visitors. I would agree. But to Brendan's point, I think Scott sort of just said it, and Atiba said it earlier. It is about making it feel very special to the person who's in that sphere. So if you're in the physical sphere, that's great, and here's a thing, and here's a creativity care kit, and here's a human who wants to talk to you, and here's an audio tour, whatever else you're going to do to make them feel good. And in the digital sphere, it's about that too. They overlap, but they're not the same people. And I do think that prior to this, a lot of institutions, particularly for the people who don't work in museum social, thought of it as just like a marketing device to get people to the building. And a thing I hope that like everybody figured out, and I have said this on a lot of talks, but I think this whole 2020, Museums 2020 was brought to you by Museum Digital, because we did a lot of work and we were there all the time, even when we were closed or open. Yes, we all deserve. But social media is really, and Museum Digital is for an audience. Some of them will come to the building, but not all of them. And that's going to be a reckoning for some in our field who've always thought of it as subsidiary.
Yeah,
or driving attendance.
I can't wait to read all of the annual reports for 2020, where all of the big shout outs aren't the attendance numbers, the blockbuster exhibitions, but the social media engagement, the press coverage of your penguins walking through the halls of the neighboring museum, and all of these like unusual well, not even those kind of unusual whimsical examples, but just the engagement that was able to be cultivated through these new avenues, or they're not necessarily even new avenues, but social media being like the plug that, as Seema, you're mentioning, not a lot of people thought of as being as substantial as it actually is. So that is critical. So talking a little bit about kind of the I word, innovation, I want to give Scott, Seema, and Atiba a big shout out for being named 2020 Museum Innovators in Blooloop. And I want to know, in your own words, what does it mean to innovate? So I know, it can be such a loaded word. It can be hype all day, every day, but also there is something to be said about the work that all three of you have done in this space, in different types of museums, different types of cities, kind of throughout your careers. So I want to, hear, what does it mean to innovate museums, and where do you see, if any, a need or an opportunity for new forms of innovation in the cultural sector? Atiba, do you want to?
Yeah, it was one of those like, who's going to go first?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's getting out of like culturals generally are risk averse. That's just kind of like how we operate. Like, let's not rock the boat too much or we'll have to throw you out. But it's really just being comfortable failing fast so you can succeed in the long run. So in a matter of months, we just paused everything we were doing and completely upended it. And it also helped accelerate many things that we had on our, oh yeah, one day we're going to do this. I think, there's a saying, quote, that's within chaos, there's profit. And oftentimes it's looked at like, profit from a financial aspect, but I look at it as we had a chance to upend and redo everything we do from the guest experience. I came in one day, I said, that desk is too big because we need as many people in the lobby. Within a couple of days, my custodial team knocked it out and we reimagined that whole space. Like, we were moving into a realm of contactless payment and touch payment and NFC payment, but it was like, nope, like this has to happen tomorrow. So a lot of phone calls, a lot of testing, a lot of, tablets in front of me, and like, we're able to launch it pretty quickly. So I would say innovation is getting out of your comfort zone, being comfortable to fail fast so you can succeed in the long run. And there's a lot of opportunities still ahead of us. And I think, one thing that comes to mind is memberships have been a key thing. We've had people, to your earlier question, Brendan, like, I had a family who lived on the corner. It would come by once in a while, but then he said, you know what? I actually want to buy a membership. I really enjoy this space so much. And it goes back to that choice and ability. I actually can now come to this space because there's very few cultural institutions and things I can do with my son that I can come to. So he bought a membership. And then I'm thinking about with memberships, as we think about what digital looks like, maybe it's either a digital only membership or a membership that includes some digital components of, you now have this kind of access. You now have curated experiences. So I think innovation is really just being comfortable failing fast so you can succeed in the long run.
Thank you. And Seema, what do you think about innovation in the field?
That's a huge question. I would jump onto what Atiba said. I don't know if I have quite an answer, but I do think a lot of the things that I've had to do this year, but also in my career, it's that you also just did it. I mean, there's a lot in this field where sometimes I walk into a museum and I see something and it's like a sign that maybe is a different color than they usually use. And I think, oh, that was 700 meetings. You know, like you think about how many things we think so hard about, and things that matter so much to us that matter to no one else. And so I think what Atiba is saying that really resonates with me is that the people often who we perceive as innovators, and sometimes, I mean, there is the privilege of being in the right place at the right time, being in a senior position. I mean, there's a lot of reasons sometimes that it comes, but some of it is saying, like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put in the diligence. I'm going to finish it. And then if it fails, I'm going to deal with that and then keep going with it. And the fear of doing it is huge in this field. I talk to people who are like, how did you get that to happen? I was like, well, I did it. And it's like the idea that you would even wonder, like, you just did it. I mean, I know that's hard for a lot of people, but the fear of doing is huge. So that's one thing I would say. In innovation, I would go with Atiba about membership. I think membership is a great way that we ensure that we have some amount of funding in our coffers every year. And I think there's a lot that can go there with innovation. I think the other side of it is there's people who we want to feel connected to our institution that don't, members or not. And I think sometimes we privilege members. So I would love to see the innovation also in the people who don't come. Now, not the people who will never come. I think that's wasted money. Like, they're never coming. Yeah. But there is an overlap. There are people who want to come but don't know it. And that's where I would love to see us innovate. And I don't think there's a single team that would innovate that. I think it's programming, it's exhibitions. It's probably, you know, social media. I actually think the biggest group that could innovate but has not been known for it is exhibitions and curatorial. That there is a lot of growth opportunity for them. And I don't know that the pandemic is, a lot of shows were pushed off, so they didn't have to innovate, whereas a lot of our other teams had to deal with this pandemic by innovating.
Thank you. Thank you. And Scott, how about you? What are your thoughts on innovation in the museum space?
So I'm going to jump off what you just said, Seema, and get myself in trouble with a lot of
places. Love this.
So the amount of conversations that I've been in on director level, that the solution to all this is another blockbuster show, would not surprise you, but it also is just kind of like not getting it. And I think that innovation is going to happen in areas where you don't expect it. It's going to happen from departments that you don't expect it to come from, and it's going to happen from different type of leadership coming up in places, and it is happening. And I think you're seeing it happen right now, and this moment is actually accelerating a bunch of it, which is great. And I think we kind of need it. You need kind of this cataclysmic change sometimes to force some of that forward and let people let go and allow some of this to happen. I do want to say, as far as innovation, I mean, Seema, I think you said, and actually you both said this really well, it's taking risk, and it is stepping up and being willing to do it yourself. That doesn't mean you have to do all this stuff yourself. That leader to say, like, I'm willing, let's do it. Let's just do it, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out on the way down. We'll adapt as needed. And if it fails, I'll take the blame and we're good. And it's partly of that kind of understanding that the risk tolerance, and then being able to teach and nurture that, and having a staff that embraces that. So it isn't just you, it's other people that you're able to kind of teach and bring along. And I feel in my career, I've been lucky to have people that were my bosses that allowed me to fail in a lot of cases, allowed me to come in and like pull, and he's like, you know, that program you did, that was great. Don't ever do that again without telling me. And kind of be in those kind of positions, but allowing me to kind of go out and do it, and then kind of get it like a light slap on the wrist. So I think those things are really important. So that partly is kind of how I feel a responsibility then, being in kind of a leadership position now and being kind of thought of as one of those innovators. How am I creating a nurturing environment to have others be able to kind of follow in those footsteps and have those opportunities as well? And when I see those opportunities, how can I step out of the way and let them have those too? And that's hard. Well, and it's something to work towards.
You have to learn it.
Want to build off of, continue our pattern here, Brent. We're just going to build off of each other. You put together the best trio ever. I think, you know, there's a unspoken thing about the importance of diversity, and kind of connecting to Scott's point, it's not necessarily about giving somebody a seat at the table. It's just like, let's just blow up the entire table, like get rid of it completely, and then decentralize everybody who can give something to say. Because from the top down, people have different eyes. They're seeing things from a different perspective. They're enjoying, and also their learned experiences are their expertise. So once you start welcoming that, you start to see how amazing what you do can be. And also to that earlier question about what you do can be for so many more people. we've often had a time where the decisions are in a very, very small vacuum, and it's 20 meetings to decide, is that going to be Aztec blue or indigo blue to get one thing done? It's like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. Like, people want to do great things and people are trusting us to provide, but there's a key part of, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility that is, we're in a realm right now we can really champion that and give so many voices a chance to say, like, hey, what about this program, or what about this one thing different that I know I would enjoy and therefore others would enjoy. So again, it's not inviting necessarily people to the table. Let's just blow up the table and just go run through Scott sprinklers and plan some programs that way.
I was gonna
have
say,
so much fun after this with our party with blow up tables. But I do have to say, the biggest frustration I've had in 2020 is the reticence of many in this field, many who also have a lot of money and power, to even like move the table a little, let alone let you bring in your dynamite and Scott sprinklers, maybe not together. But I think that I find, and you have meetings where they start with table setting, and I'm like, why are we setting that table? Like, why do we need to do that? And I do think at some level it's the fear of those meetings that don't go anywhere. But I think those meetings don't go anywhere because you've decided it's going a certain place. I was talking to Barry Joseph, does games, and we were talking about games. It was on, like, we had done a blog conversation like last week or whatever. And one of the things I asked him was, so I'm just curious, did your games end where you wanted them? And he said, of course not. That's game development. And I thought, that is exactly the opposite of museum exhibition development. And so that's our problem. Our premise often is incorrect.
Totally. Well, thank you for all those points. And innovation obviously does not happen in a vacuum. And I know we all have different communities that we're involved with, different perspectives we're exposed to, people kind of flipping our ideas and assumptions on their head. What types of projects, initiatives, people, partnerships, companies, industries, whatever it might be, have you looked to or found inspiration in over the course of this pandemic, whether it be inside the cultural sector or outside the cultural sector?
Food services is one that comes to mind. In college, I worked in a dining hall, just cleaning up after people. You learn so much from people that way. But there's a great book, Zingerman's Guide to Great Customer Service, I believe. And it's required reading for anyone that is in any which way wants to develop, because I think your clientele is making a choice to come into your space, and they can really go anywhere or stay home. That's always the easiest option on a Friday night, but they're choosing to come into your space. So what are the things you need to equip yourself and your staff with to make sure that you are helping them in every which way possible, and also knowing that they're going to bring something in from the outside to you. We had a family one time who came in, bought the ticket, and then just went off. And I said, guys, let me step in. They just had a bad day. And that's just kind of, we're here to provide a joyous space for them. Let's figure out how we can de-escalate and get them to where they're going. So Zingerman's Guide to Great Customer Service, also a fantastic location in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
It is, Zingerman's is great. I would say food service too. We have a great restaurant. There's no book about it, but it was in a Guardian article. Sorry, my dog showed up, I think, in our Lost Talk, and it's somewhere here. So sorry for the barking. But dogs, pets, kids are always allowed in Zoom during pandemic. But ours is Edwin's. It's called Edwin's. Shout out to everybody I've seen who's in Northeast Ohio. A lot of you probably know it, but it's a restaurant on the edge of Cleveland and Shaker Heights that also does helps people who maybe people are who maybe were in prison or had something happen, and then they get this job. But the thing that I learned that I loved, and I'd already known him from work, but he stood, I swear, I don't think he slept during the pandemic. He stood outside of his restaurant and waved every person who did pick up. Every single one. But it was the commitment to his organization and his staff. He said, I'm working for my staff, and he wrote this whole thing. This is how much I need to earn to pay my staff. And that was, to me, and I think a number of restaurants had that. It's not just the thing that Atiba said about the service, but it's also the people who are serving that I really appreciated. That's what I looked at.
Wow, almost thinking of the people you work with as family members, and even thinking, Atiba, you didn't say visitor, you said clientele, and thinking about you are here to serve them, and that kind of elevated approach that hospitality and restaurant work kind of embodies. That's really powerful. Thank you for that, Atiba, and thank you for that, Seema. How about you, Scott? Where are you looking for some of this outside inspiration that enable you to turn on the sprinklers or pick up the coolest indie rock band or all of the interesting dynamic things you guys do over at the Philbrook?
Public school teachers, and seeing how been able to pivot on this and learn new technologies that they've had to learn practically overnight, and be able to not and transfer their lesson plans over, but truly connect with students in a very foreign platform and very difficult. So we have distance learning a kindergartner and a fourth grade at home. And it is seeing how these teachers are able to work, particularly our kindergartner who needs attention constantly. He's like me. So he needs attention constantly in that, and able to connect with him and teach him how to read. And he's learning how to read over Zoom calls between everything else that's going on. So I admire the teachers that have been able to do this, that have been trying to work on equity, that have been trying to have lunches that have gone out to students in the community and trying to balance all of that in a nearly impossible situation and get paid so little for doing it.
And seems so like our public schools, we partner with them, and we had a meeting where they tried to explain, we gave them all kits to make sketchbooks for the fourth grade, I should say. And we were sort of nervous, you know, we had stuffed them over the summer. And then we were like, we have 1,700 sketchbook kits we might need you to get to kids. And they were like, oh my gosh, totally okay. And then they told me how they did it. And I was like, we actually had to ask them to tell us again, because we couldn't fathom how amazing that the work they were doing. That's totally true.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you how much how valuable or invaluable people that go above and beyond and kind of put their blood, sweat, and tears to every type of human interaction, to everything that they do, and just how I think we often lose sight of that. And the pandemic has definitely kind of shown us that, you know, we need to appreciate our people, whether they're internal, their staff, their team members, or they're those that we serve. And you know, the public school teachers and teachers at large are a huge part of that. And I say that as a product of public schools. Much love for public school teachers. I know we only have 3 minutes before the end of this all, and I'd love for our amazing guests, Scott, Seema, and Atiba, who have shared so much insight and inspiration over the last hour, to leave us with one big idea or small idea that we can bring back to our organizations or bring back to our lives during these moments and kind of into the upcoming years. So I'd love to start with Seema. Let's hear it.
So one, I want to put in a plug. I did have an idea, which is that lots of us have done amazing work this year. And I feel like if we package them into some sort of blog post or online course, and if you're interested in that, tell me. I was thinking maybe you could do one that's sparking creativity, and another that is, sparking curiosity. In that, my hope is, one thing I would love us to take out of this year is that collaborating and sharing our resources across each other is actually better for all of us. You know, Atiba brought up the point at the beginning. We have global audiences. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, I mean, I was giving some class about lino cut, and I'm not the best at lino cut, but there was somebody from like the Highlands of Scotland who showed up, and there has to be somebody closer who could do this better. But I was so glad to have them. And so if anybody is interested in partnering with me on an online course, I'd love it. But more importantly, I would look at who could you work with to make your work better and their work better, because it is the sort of bread and butter work we've done all year that doesn't always get the kind of, you know, the applause it could deserve. And maybe you can amplify your message by doing it with others.
Thank you. I do hope that 2021 is a year of collaboration. So thank you for that, Seema. And Scott, what is one idea that you want to leave everybody with going into the new year?
And I think we need to look at how we change our metrics of success. And so much of the field has been built on more. So more footage, more collection, more budget, more. And if you look at most directors, that's their bio. How much more do they add to whatever the thing that they're in? We need to talk about impact. How are you taking what you're doing and actually serving the needs of the community around you? And that can look a very different way. And I think this has kind of caused us to actually look at that and where do we truly have an impact and on our staff, and then think about resilience in that too. So a lot of museums are going to be looking at scaling slightly down, and that's not a bad thing. Instead of building that new wing, maybe we think about ways that we can support our staff better.
Thank you, Scott. And Atiba, how about you? One big, medium, or small idea that you want to leave everybody with today?
As always, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to build off of what Scott said. I think it's
Perfect. That's collaboration. That's what Seema was talking about.
right. I underscore everything Seema said. I think it's for the arts and cultural space, ROI doesn't mean the same thing. I think ROI now means return on impact, and really building that into all of our planning, so that it might cost $20,000 to do this, but we're building so much goodwill with audiences. So that's my new thing, return on impact. This is recorded. I will take a small licensing fee going forward. But a quote that I love that really is near and dear to my heart is by James Baldwin. And it's, "The world is before you, and you do not need to take it or leave it as when you came in." So we should keep that on the top of our mind, because it ultimately says, like, we are entering and inheriting some space that we didn't build, we didn't create. We are taking the choice to walk through that door. Now let's also take the choice to impact it and change it in a way for the better. I think collectively, collaboratively, this group, this call, and everybody who's been on these panels, we have the recipes to make the world a better place and really drive the ROI, return on impact quotient, even higher. So yeah, that's, continue doing what we do.
Thank you. And I love that idea of the return on impact. That's amazing. Well, thank you for being here today. I want to thank all of our special guests, Seema and Scott and Atiba. Thank you for taking an hour out of your day to be with us and to share some ideas and inspiration. I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday. Hopefully you have time to rest and recuperate before the new year. Everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great holiday season, and see you in the new year. Bye, everybody.